Not Quite Cool
Darkness
is a podcast that contains spoilers, opinions, and general. Listener discretion is advised.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this Not Quite Darkness, our first spinoff of Not Quite Cool. We're going to have tons of them that just have no quite Rob Prago. We don't want Rob involved anymore. That's basically the
Absolutely not.
I'm here with Chad. And Chad, I'm seeing you got a fucking Blumhouse shirt on. That's incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah, you got to represent. It's the best, horror studio around.
A24 exists, but yes, I see where you're coming from. But I heard today that Blumhouse is officially starting their own video game production company.
Oh, wow.
Blumhouse Video Games to do exclusively horror video games. So I'm super excited about that.
I heard, too, that they might combine with James Wan, Atomic Monster.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah, so I'll be all for that, too.
Me, too. That would be incredible. But we've gone off on a diatribe, but it's semi-related to what we're doing. Chad, can you tell the people what our purpose of this show is, what we're going to be watching?
So there is a 3-part documentary. It's called In Search of Darkness, and it's really 80s horror films. And it is hours and hours of documentary information on these films. I feel like every part one is maybe 4 or 5 hours. The next one's 5 hours. And they just really are going over a lot of 80s horror movies. So we're going to endeavor to go through the list that they go through. The caveat really is that it's needs to be streaming for us because we may not own them, and we're not making any money off this. We can't be buying these movies or paying for them. Now we may own some of them anyway, because some of them are well known, some are more obscure. Some of these will be first time watches for us. A lot of them will be rewatches, but it's all 80s horror. That's what we're here for this particular one, which is why Rob's not here. He's scared of horror movies in general.
Yeah.
So,
and he's also in his 80s, so he feels like he's already accomplishing something. I also want to point out that the director of In Search of Darkness, his name is David A. Weiner. I'm not even making that up. That's his name. He does an amazing job with the film, but his name is Weiner, and I feel we're going to point that out every single episode.
and he also directed In Search of Tomorrow. Which is the same thing, but with sci-fi movies of the 80s. So we might hit that too as well. We'll see how it goes.
And there's another one, In Search of the Last Action Hero, which is all about action films and stuff like that. We have a plethora of movies here to go through. And that being said, let's go ahead and change it up and go straight into the movie we're talking about here. And that is Changeling, 1980. Starring George C. Scott, written by Russell Hunter, William Gray, Diana Maddox, and directed by Peter Medak, who also directed The Ruling Class, which is one of my favorite movies of Peter O'Toole. Great movie. Chad, the Changeling. I'm just gonna make you explain a lot of stuff because this is fun for me. Rob's not here clearly because he thought we were talking about the Angelina Jolie movie, and even then he didn't watch it. So
I was a little afraid, honestly, if he was going to show up. I was like, he's going to show up and he was going to have watched the Angelina Jolie one. I know it.
Which would have been so fun. So fun. We should just tell him the wrong movie. Like whatever the next one is, we're watching Hangover Part 2. And we'll watch it. And just be like looking through his notes. Like anyway. He
notes. You think he takes notes? Come on.
He says he's going to watch the next one, but anyway. So, Chad, explain to us what The Changeling was about.
So, surprisingly, it's based on a true story. So, it's a ghost story starring George C. Scott. And he basically, there's a lot of stuff going on, but the gist of it, he moves into a house. The house is haunted, and he's trying to figure out the mystery of what happened in this house and what he goes through.
Yeah.
But to start from the beginning, the reason why he moves to this house is, and a lot of people, this is why a lot of people think this is, a terrifying movie, is the beginning where his wife and child are killed. So, you always have movies like that where a lot of people, they have that on their list of scariest movies or most terrifying movies because, their child dies, and that's terrifying. Of course it is. Stephen King says that, Pet Sematary is his most terrifying novel. And while, you can debate that, it is to him because the death of a child, so it's pretty hardcore in that. But George C. Scott, his wife and kid die. So he just decides
right off the bat, you don't get to know them, no names. We're just killing these kids off immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Just, car crash, it's done and over with. So he decides, he's moving away, he's changing careers, all that stuff. And he moves to the other side of the country. He moves into this house that is massive. And he's by himself. He's not married anymore, obviously. He's a widow.
Widower,
why did he
think,
widower. Yeah, I don't understand why he needed all that room. It's a massive house.
The thing that fucks me up about it is he doesn't get the house until he gets there. He knows he's moving to Seattle, packs up a piano because that's his job. He plays piano. He's a composer. No idea where he's going to go. And I guess the housing market was so different then that you could just pick a fucking house, and he happened to get a mansion. But we find out why the mansion is unoccupied. Go ahead. Yeah.
But yeah, it is totally a mansion. And what was also weird at the start that I thought was going to play into it, when it starts off, it has a date. It's like November 22nd, 27th. And then later there's, after his wife and kid dies, there's a second date of March 4th. So I wrote them down because I was like, oh, well, this must come into play. These dates must be important, but they're not at all. We don't see dates again. Even when he's talking after March 4th, he's talking to his friends and he's saying yeah, it's been 4 months since they passed away. So you don't even need the dates as that type of frame of reference. So it's just a little odd that they have those dates, and it might be because of the whole based on a true story thing, but it wouldn't based on a true story about the dude that moved into the house that his wife and kid died.
Yeah, it's the scary part. That's the part.
Yeah, it's just weird. So, but anyway, so he moves into the house, and like these ghost stories, weird things happen. This is more cerebral than some of the other ghost stories. It's not like a ghost trying to necessarily kill you. There's not stuff flying out at you. You're not laying in bed, a demon ghost is trying to get
Right.
you. He's just hearing noises, which can be potentially explained away.
Yeah.
The water's running. It's an old house. Those things can, be explained away. But what gets me, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, Keith, is at what point do you say, forget it, I'm out? I'm done with this house, because he stays in this house longer than I feel like any normal human being would stay in this house.
It depends on what the rent was, to be honest, because that's a big house. That house is big enough where I could be like, Ghost, you take the third floor, I'll be on the first, and we're good. You know what I mean? When the staircase catches fire, that's probably the point. I'd be like, I'm going to go to the Hotel 6. But
my gosh,
that's deep into it.
Yeah, that's at the end of the movie, after everyone's already said, get out of the house.
But for a vast majority of the movie, it seems like him and Ghosty are on the same side. You know what I mean?
Well, they're certainly on the same side, but regardless if they're on the same side, if I hear, like he hears at some point, water running, clearly it sounds like somebody's taking a shower in my big ass mansion. That's what's happening. He goes upstairs, and there's the bathtub, the running water, and he sees a ghost kid in the bathtub. And he just backs up. He looks a little freaked out, but he just backs up. And then the next scene is, let me just do some research on this house, I guess. Forget that.
Yeah, but also this was a period of time where you could buy houses big enough where you could be living there a couple days and not have gone into all the rooms. You know what I mean? All the houses I've ever been in, I can see all the rooms from the outside.
Right.
That's so it's a different time period, I think. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just, again, like you said, it's a massive house, and he's going to research now. that he saw a ghost kid. And we had a classic, and I guarantee you in our podcast, Not Quite Darkness, this will not be the first time that we have a microfiche scene.
Or the last time.
This is the 80s. This won't be the last time. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, this is will probably be a staple for a while, these 80s horror movies.
But to be fair, it made me feel really nice because I used to look up shit on microfiche and like I really miss it. Like and so there was like this nostalgic, like, oh, I am old thing that was happening.
And then I want to say too, how now the realtor is played by his real life wife at the time.
Really?
And yeah.
Okay. What an age gap. But that's
Yeah. But I would say, how thirsty is she for him? Like, she's showing up all the time. She shows up in this tight ass riding gear, just like, oh, I was just going to drop this off or whatever. And then they go ride horses.
Oh, together. I dropped my whip and then just,
She wants him so bad or whatever. Bad. But you're right. I mean, it seems like there's an age gap or whatever. But, that was back in the day when, Wilford Brimley is, younger than Tom Cruise right now. So how old is George C. Scott really?
He's probably 27, and I'm just talking out my ass.
I'll say this, though, about George C. Scott. He's an intimidating dude. Like,
absolutely.
He looks scary, whether he's happy or sad or mad. It's like, I don't want to mess with this guy. He is terrifying.
And I think the thing for me, I know George C. Scott from, Patton, Exorcist 3. Exorcist 3 is probably the big one that I watch more than anything else. But he's still intimidating because he just has that sort of attitude about him. But I also feel he has more gentle moments in this than he ever had in other films. You know what I mean? He was born in 1927. His wife, Trish Van Devere, was born in 1941. She's still alive. Maybe she can come on the podcast and defend her decisions.
So 14 years, not crazy, but it just the look of them is what kind of makes it look weird. But like I said, you see the ghost kid, and that he hasn't even found the secret room yet. So now he finds a secret room that leads up to an attic, and creepy looking attic with the music box
with one room. Like, you have an attic for one room. That's the fucked up thing, because it's like a tower. It's a tower of death with a death wheelchair, a death music box, like everything in it is death.
And it's hidden on top of that. It's not just like, hey, it was a fun playroom or anything. This room was meant to hide a child up there. I mean, that's what's going on. So super creepy. Again, I'm fine with this mansion, no problem. Like, I'll just see what's going on. I'll bring the hot realtor to come take a look.
Yeah.
And then again, he should get out of that house. He should be leaving the house. When he goes to the realtor's office, one of the other realtors says, they shouldn't have sold you that house. You need to get out of that house. Like, at every turn, the ghost or people are saying, get out of that house. And he's nonplussed about it. He really is.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not even a concern. He's just more concerned with playing piano, finding the mystery, banging a hot real estate chick. Like, that's his life, which that's a good life, man. I understand it, George C. Scott. I would do it too.
It would be totally fine, except for the ghost aspects of all of it. You got the mansion. We're definitely going to have some disagreements on this podcast as we're going along, because again, I'm out 25 minutes into this film, and you wait until the house is burning down before you're like, well, the rent's still pretty cheap.
I'm very passive. I'm like,
so you got all that stuff. That's not enough. Now, we established at the beginning of the film that his child had like a red ball that, his child would play with. And then suddenly there's a red ball rolling down the steps. So that freaks him out, as it would, but not like totally. He takes the ball to like the bridge and throws it into the river and gets rid of it.
Well, hot chick, she's not even that hot, but I guess for the time period, I guess.
Compared to George C. Scott.
Yeah, she's the hotter one, I guess. Chick I would rather bone as opposed to George C. Scott. She pulls out the ball first. That wasn't even a euphemistic intention. and then he has like a moment of like, that's the thing too about it. I don't understand why she's so thirsty for him, because he keeps going through nom flashes, and understandably so.
Yes.
It's like 4 months, but she'll say, I love strawberries, and he's like, my daughter ate strawberries. Like, it's just,
100%.
but I also wonder, this ball going down the stairs, that's now become sort of a trope, right? Is this the first time this happened, or has this happened in a movie earlier?
It's possible this is the first time, because I know when I watched this movie for the first time, not that long ago, I mean, like a few years ago, I recognized that scene. Like, that is a scene that I knew from this movie.
Yeah.
Not just like from other films. So I believe that this is the first time that we've seen.
I think so too.
Something like that. But especially, like, again, like I said, he throw the ball into the river, comes back to the house, and the ball rolls down the steps again. That's like classic. You see that in a ton of ghost movies and stuff like that. Like, the one off the top of my mind, the Babadook, when she burns the book and now the book's back, stuff like that happens in ghost movies. Again, he's just like, oh yeah, I probably need to just check into this a little more now. So again, classic seance scene. Here we go. This movie's hitting all the beats.
And it's also very like Warrens. Like, it's letting you know this is a thin pastiche of the Warrens in a big bad way. But I loved the scene. I thought the sequence was great. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, the seance scene was pretty cool. I was more worried about the paper situation. I was like, they're going to run out of paper really soon. Because she's just not even writing stuff half the time, and he's just throwing the paper away. It's
and
there's no way they brought enough paper for this
at all. And that's got to be like the shittiest part when you're going to a seance and you're like, I forgot to go to Walmart and get the new paper. Fuck me.
Exactly. Yeah. You got all that paper, and then, like, again, the ghost is trying to tell you something. Worst case scenario, you run out of paper.
Yeah.
So you got to have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your gimmick. You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Like Gene Simmons doesn't go to a concert and forget his tongue at home. He breaks it.
And it's just odd paper too. It's not even like normal. It's like huge, like, not even what is it, legal size, even bigger than that.
But it reminded me of, and again, this is showing age. Now, there's a little bit of an age difference between the two of us, but I think it was probably the same when you were a kid. When you were in kindergarten, you got the hot dog size paper instead of the long brown sheets,
right?
Like,
yep.
That's what it reminded me of, kind of. And so again, there was a lot of points in this movie where, like, fuck, I'm old, my back hurts.
Yeah, and this movie came out in 1980, but there's no doubt this movie is 70s through and through.
Absolutely.
Now, granted, it was filmed in the 70s because it came out in 1980. But, we're going to see some movies, I'm sure, that came out in 1980 that are still going to have a 1980s feel to us.
Yeah.
But this is, if you would have told me this movie came out in 1970, I'd be like, yeah, of course it did. Like,
you would have said 67. I would have been like, yep, makes total sense. But
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but, these tropes that we're seeing, I'm kind of like you, though. Is this like some of the first times we're seeing a lot of this stuff?
Yeah.
So it's not, it's new. I mean, it is new, even though we've seen it 100 times.
But it's like,
because we've seen a ton of movies.
But it's like the combination of all of them feels like if they had already been tropes, then this movie would have been stupid. But the fact that it is so many of them at the same time, firing on all cylinders, like, it feels like this is something cutting edge. So story-wise, we're at the seance.
Yep.
Ladies writing paper. Keep going.
So we're at the seance, and that's when they discover that there was really a boy that used to live up in that room. And they find out how he dies, in the sense that the father, the man of the house, killed the son. And I feel like that's a little bit of information that they get. And based on that information, George C. Scott figures everything out almost immediately. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, okay, let me check this will. Like, I'm automatically going to check the will. Let me check the blueprints of these places. So he finds, he says, oh, well, he must have killed the son. He went overseas, adopted another kid, because the will won't give him any money. And then now I'm looking at, oh, this well is totally not on the thing. So that's got to be where the kid is. Like, he figures everything out so fast,
so smoothly. And it's like there is a point where I can excuse a lot of that Discovery stuff because they do show him like talking to a bunch of other old people like those stuff. But but at the same time, there's like a moment where he's like, oh, he killed his son. He must have had a ranch. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? How did you jump there, George? Like,
it kind of reminds me of this. This is like an old Batman trope, and we love Batman. We're talking about old Batman comics, which I would consider bad writing sometimes, where a villain, let's just say the Scarecrow's doing something. And we know it's the Scarecrow, but Batman doesn't know it's the Scarecrow that's doing this. And based on what's happened, he's like, oh, this has got to be the work of the Scarecrow. Literally 2 comics ago, Joker did the same exact thing.
Exactly.
Like,
all of your villains are this fucking crazy, but
yes.
you can pinpoint it. Like,
yeah. And Batman's definitely a detective, but certainly there are times when he does detective work and discovers what it is. But it's those moments where he's like, oh, this is definitely the work of the Scarecrow. You're reaching just so that we can jump to the next point of the story.
Absolutely. But it makes me think 2 things. A, is Batman just so much better of a detective than I am that there is some logical step there? And B, what would George C. Scott look like as Batman? That would have been incredible. That would have been the most intimidating Batman ever.
I would be terrified of George C. Scott with or without the cowl.
Yeah.
Again, I've already made it clear. So again, he's looking at the map. He's like, oh yeah, the son's got to be buried here in this well. There's a house where the well is. So again, I know that you're passive about stuff. Somebody shows up at your house, like George C. Scott and Hot Chick show up at this random person's house, and they say, hey, we think there's a dead kid buried in this room. Can we just dig it up? And she literally says, I've got it. Let me think about it. Like,
well, but the thing that's fucked up about it is that she's like, interesting you say that, because last night we had a dream that there was a dead kid buried on the, that's the part that's like, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, but yes, that could happen. People have weird dreams all the time. They're coincidental dreams all the time. I'm asking you, your kid just had that dream and some random people show up and say, hey, we want to dig this up. Are you going to say, let me think about it? Or you be like, yeah, go for it. There's got to be a dead kid in there.
There's a lot more questions because I'm like, are you gonna pay for the repairing of it? Like, when are we talking about? Because I have to get sleep. Like, there's a lot of, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not as cut and dry. I need more info.
Well, a longer movie, maybe we would have had those scenes.
Yeah, if this was a Netflix series, then we would have
brought a contractor in. There would have been a lot of stuff happening with that. So, of course, she says yes. Cut to, they're digging it up, and again, he finds the body because he's right. Again, another trope of the final resting place of a ghost. Find my body. That is a trope of ghost movies and, mysteries, The Ring, stuff like that, So again, this movie's hitting all the notes, like you said, and it's got to be the first time that they've all come together,
or that they've been incorporated like this.
Yes. And again, this is still based on a true story. This so far, you can argue what happened in the house as far as ghost stuff.
Yeah.
But he researched and he went and they found the dead kid, that was killed. And then an adopted child was replaced, quote, Changeling, which is, where we get the title of the thing from. But now I'm a little bit confused. Not confused. I just don't know what they're trying to do after that. So after he finds the body, the cops are there. And the cops, are like, well, who is this? And George C. Scott is like, I have no idea who it is. So I'd have some more questions about that. I know the cop doesn't necessarily believe him, but it's still like they let him off the hook pretty easily.
Especially when you took us to a dead body underneath a fucking house and you don't have anything else to say.
Yeah. And again, George C. Scott looks like he's about 80 years old. How long was this body here? And what did you have to do with it? Getting it put there, there'd be a lot more questioning as far as that goes. So again, he doesn't do that. but he goes to so we missed it, we didn't talk about it. The Changeling is like a senator or a congressman or something like that, a very important person.
And if you're not familiar, the actual term changeling comes from mythology. It was in mythological terms, it's a fairy child that replaces your child. So even without explaining it, that's where the movie gets its sort of title, but instead finds a realistic example of it. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. So he goes and he tries to confront the senator with his story, not blackmail, just to confront him. And I still don't understand, okay, what's your end game here, George C. Scott?
But he does this after he breaks back into the house that they dug up the well in.
To remove evidence. The cops would be interested in that as well.
Well, Mother Earth gives him a necklace, and he takes that necklace. And then the scene before it, hot chick, which again is whatever. Hot chick says, "How are you going to reach the senator?" And he's like, "I have a plan." And then it just cuts to him running and screaming across the. Hey, look at this! Look at it!
Like at the airport, he's like, yeah, I don't understand. Like, what are you trying to accomplish, dude? It does this is when it just goes off the rails a little bit for me with all that. I just don't understand what his end game is, what he's trying to accomplish. So he goes back to George C. Scott goes back to the house after his failure of not talking to the senator, and the house is pissed, not happy with him at all. But he's still like, yeah, this is my house. I'm going to stay here. Like, I don't know what you want me to do, dude. I literally found your body, and I tried to tell the guy, I don't know what you want me to do.
Dude, I got Wi-Fi being installed next week. Please, just there's plenty of room. But also in between this, hot chick goes looking for George C. Scott. She comes to the house, and then the house leads her up to the room to scare her with a wheelchair. I think I missed it. Is that right? Yeah.
The wheelchair attacks her for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't remember. I'm a little fuzzy on when that happens versus when he comes back. It might be at the same time, or like she shows up first.
Yeah, I think she falls down the stairs. He comes in, gets her out, goes back in the house for he had something on the crock pot. I don't know.
Exactly.
And then that's when for me it gets sort of confusing, because he's given old man senator the power coin, whatever it is, and the old man senator staring at it, and he's having a vision of how the kid died. And then he's also inside of the house walking up the staircase as it says so far.
Yeah, but before that too, what happens is a policeman shows up at his house, because the senator is now called and said, this dude has my property, the necklace, and he's like, I don't have the necklace. I don't know what you're talking about. Again, I don't know what George C. Scott is trying to accomplish with any of this. But at this point, the cop leaves and he's like, I'll be back with a warrant and we'll rip this place apart. Well, the house kills the cop, who legitimately probably did nothing wrong. The cop's doing his job. He just shows up looking for property and he says, I'll be back. Well, he's not, because again, now the house can kill people. And is that because the body's been released, you think?
Or is this where the rule from Scream comes of never say you'll be right back? Because you know what I mean? Because he says it and then fucking violates it. Yeah, I don't know. Because the house also, he also is showing up where his dead body is, but he's also showing up in the senator's office. He's going a lot of places. He's a very active ghost.
Yeah, and not only, again, like I said, everyone at every turn is trying to tell him to get out of this house, even in the house. Now, the realtor company has broken his lease, and they're legitimately kicking him out of the house, and he's still not leaving. Like at every turn. Meanwhile, Keith, you're just chilling in the bathtub all this time. You're fine. Squatters' rights. Is that what you're going with?
I would be stressed when they got rid of my lease. That would have been, I'm like, fuck. This place had a good backyard, but plus, how hard it is to move a piano? Like, oh, God.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so now it's like you said, it's kind of weird. It's wonky. What's happening? George C. Scott's is in the house, and the house catches on fire. Stuff is breaking, all this. And then the senator is having a vision where he's walking up the stairs, and the the senator dies, as far as that goes, and they finally get out of the house as the house burns to the ground.
Yeah.
And then George C. Scott and Hot Chick go to the senator's house one last time, and they see that he's dead. Again, I don't understand what George C. Scott was trying to accomplish after he found the body.
Yeah,
Help me understand.
I think that George C. Scott is literally just trying to put the ghost at rest, and he feels that the senator has to come forth to do that. But I think one of the things I like about this movie so much is that he gets, like, there's this sort of ambiguity about who's in the right and who's in the wrong. Because I honestly don't feel like the senator was just a kid when he was adopted. It's not his
orphan at that.
An orphan. It's not his fucking fault that this guy was a terrible dad and killed his real child. And there's even some shots in there where you could imply that maybe he didn't even know that he wasn't the real son.
Well, I think maybe not that he was the real son, but he doesn't necessarily. You could make the argument that he didn't know that the dad killed the other son. The dad could easily have said, "My son was sickly and he died."
Yeah,
but the world can't know that.
Yeah,
so you could easily say that's an argument.
Yeah.
But even with that argument, the senator was clearly had some sort of connection with the other realtor, because at some point the realtor calls the senator and is like, they're digging into the background. So,
and it's almost like she's
know.
and it's almost like she's glad. She says something to the effect of, "We're glad to help you any way I can," or something like that, which makes me think she wants his old dick too. I don't know, but there's a lot of that real estate place is just they're dying for some. It's a thirsty place.
Yeah, it is.
but it's like, that is that ghost just vengeful that its life was cut short and now it's demanding someone else's? It seems like the motivation of the ghost isn't clear. And normally when something's motivation isn't clear, I'm like, oh, that's dumb. I loved it this time. Like I was totally on board, like, with not knowing personally. I don't know.
So do you think, in your opinion, when George C. Scott actually was able to speak to the senator and explain to him what he thought happened, which is what actually happened, all George C. Scott wanted the senator to say was like, "Yep, you're right."
Exactly. I think if in George C. Scott's mind, if the senator admits to it, the ghost is at peace. All the issues have been resolved. And that George C. Scott can't do that. He comes back into the house. "What do you want from me?" Piano, piano, piano. Which also, as a pianist, like, he does a great job when they're not really close on his hands. But then sometimes his fingering is off, to quote a date of mine back from high school. I think it's
like you were close to any of that in high school. Come on, Keith.
Exactly. I wear a Mortal Kombat shirt now that lets you know how much of a woman's man I am. But okay, so we've gone through the movie. What do you think about it?
So I enjoyed it. I did like the movie. I know I'm poking fun of it, some things here as far as that goes. My letterbox rating would be 3 out of 5. It's good. It's a good movie. And I also can see, again, the tropes that maybe aren't tropes for this movie, but they become tropes maybe because of this movie. So you got to give it props for that. What would you give it as far as the rating goes?
I loved it. I'm looking up my letterbox right now. I think I probably gave it a 5 out of 5 because that's what I give it.
That'd be my guess. Everything's a 5 out of 5.
I really dug it. This is not my first time watching it. I've watched it the first time probably a decade ago, I would say, maybe even more. And I remember being blown away by it because it just caught me so off guard. It was sort of echoes with that you're actually, this isn't a horror story, it's just a ghost story. But the ambience of the film, I love that late 60s, 70s, and apparently 1980 vibe that, like, The Omen has. And so I gave it 4.5 stars on Letterboxd out of 5.
Oh, so you didn't like it that much? Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, this is one of the worst ones. I don't think it would work well today because of the pacing is so classic pacing as opposed to modern pacing. I think that would turn a lot of people off, like Rob Prago, where he's used to Elementary and it's just quick paced.
Well, as far as this goes, what's funny about it is this is a rewatch for me as well. I watched it maybe 3 or 4 years ago, so not that terribly long ago. And when this was, again, the first one up, I was kind of like, oh, do I want to, like, I remember liking it, but I remember thinking it was kind of long, potentially. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be some slow parts. But I really didn't feel that with the
Yeah.
rewatch. I didn't feel that it was slow. And again, it was an hour and 47 minutes, I believe. Hour and 47 minutes. So it flew by.
Yeah.
So I feel like if it was made today, the pacing that you're talking about would be different in the sense that A24 would make this film. It would be 2 hours and 20 minutes long.
It'd be glorious.
We would hear, when he plays the piano, we would hear the entire 8-minute song, him playing that, and we would just see shots of the house.
And his fingering would be perfect. It would be Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He would learn how to play piano for it. This is what we're doing from now on. We're going to remake the movies on every one of these.
Recast it.
Yeah. Joseph Gordon-Levitt would be my dude for it. And I think you would be able to see some of the being torn back and forth. If George C. Scott were still alive, I would make him be the senator. That would be fucking great.
Oh, yeah.
But he's dead. So he could play the kid now, I guess.
And we could actually have a hot chick.
Yeah. She's hot for her time. Absolutely.
Listen, I'm joking. She's a beautiful
woman and a great performance. Absolutely great performance. You can just really tell her motivation is get some of that George C. cock instead of I completely see why it's on this list. I completely see why this is a place to jump off from, because it is it gives you everything you want to see, all the horror ghost story tropes, and none of them feel stale. They all feel fresh. They all feel like this is the first time you've ever seen them. Even having seen them millions of times since, the way it's presented here, I'm on board every second,
I agree.
So
but I do want to tell you this too. I read this when I was looking at some of the trivia, and you will enjoy this, Keith, to bring it specifically to you. In a Scream, either documentary or commentary, Neve Campbell is quoted as saying, "This is the scariest film she's ever seen."
Oh God! Oh, I love that woman so much. Oh, maybe that's another thing we'll do on the show. What would Neve Campbell think of this movie?
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I got for it. I enjoyed it immensely. Look, this podcast is going to be up on the YouTube channel. It'll be available where all podcasts are available. And in the meantime, Chad, where can folks find you?
They can find me on Twitter, Chad129X. They can find the podcast, NQC Podcast, on Twitter. And I think the next one, just to give everybody a heads up, the next one will be Friday the 13th, the original.
Awesome. I can't wait. So guys, go watch Friday the 13th and come back and join us as we go back into the Not Quite Darkness. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.